Hi everyone, I'm Paulette, the mother half of the mother-daughter team of Paulette and Tess from Tulip Square, and today we're going to make some scrappy blocks. This is a real simple process that you can do even if you're a real beginner, and if you're more experienced, it's still kind of fun to make these. So what I did is I went through my overflowing scrap bin and I picked out a whole bunch of nice colorful scraps. And what I'm doing, first of all, I ironed them all. It helps if they're ironed. And now I'm just going to start sewing random pieces together. I picked a lot of different colors and a lot of different sizes and shapes, but you can stick to a color scheme if you want, or you can stick to more of a small size or more of a large size. I'm just doing very random shapes, as you can see. I want these all to be just really colorful and just kind of all crazy mixed up. So I'm just sorting through my fabrics here and finding out something that I want to add to this piece, and I'm just going to keep building these pieces together until I get to the size I want. And I think what I'll do is make placemats this time. You can make placemats, runners, table toppers, quilts, whatever you want with scrappy blocks. You can make as many or as few as you want. You can make them big or small. Now you can see I'm just playing around with my weird shapes and adding different pieces. Now here you can see I've got a straight line on this blue piece. So as long as I've got a straight line to follow, I can cut off that extra piece. But you need a straight line on either the top or the bottom. So here we're just gonna sew that piece, and then I will trim that little edge. It helps trim all your seam allowances just so you don't have too much bulk in your seams. So right here I'm just going to trim that off a little bit. They don't have to be perfect, but you do want to just reduce some of the bulk. And I'm just going to keep picking pieces of fabric and just keep adding them to this little piece here. And you can also make several small pieces and then add them together. So I think this is what I'm going to try here. I'm going to make a couple of pieces with little pieces and then connect them to the piece with the bigger pieces, just to make it interesting, because I don't want everything all going the same way and I don't want it just going too evenly. So I'm just going to take some of those small pieces and sew them together. Trying to think if there's anything else I can tell you that is necessary, because these are really pretty easy to do. One thing I would recommend is that you are ironing this as you go. Now normally I would be, except my iron is on the other side of the room and I'm not going to get up every 3-inch seam and go ironing it, so I'm just kind of doing a little finger press as I go. But I would recommend to you that you iron these, and when I'm making them off screen I am ironing them. But now here I'm just going to take these odd shaped pieces. Now you notice that on either one of these pieces, oh, not quite ready there, it's not quite long enough. I'm going to add another little piece to the bottom first. So let's do that. Now you notice, because this is not straight, I'm not going to sew straight along that edge. I'm going to draw a little line on it. So I do have a straight line to sew against. If you are sewing against a straight edge, it's fine, but if you don't, you need to draw it, because you don't want to make, weird curved lines. Now I'm going to take those two larger pieces and sew them together, and they obviously are not a good fit. There's no straight edge on either one of them. So I've just got to put them together, making sure that there's no gaps underneath that end up to be a hole in the seam. So I'm making sure I'm far enough in on the bottom one that I can't completely see, and then I'm going to draw the line again so we can see exactly where I'm making a straight seam. And I'm far enough in so I can see the bottom piece along the whole seam, and I don't have any gaps in the seam. Now we've got that done. That's a nice little seam. We can add some more pieces. Sometimes I just like to add a long skinny strip. Yeah, like that. Now we got to figure out on this other side. I think I'm going to sew a few short pieces together again because I like the way that red one looks there, and I like the way that yellow one looks there. So then I'm going to have to put something up in this corner. So I'm going to sew something to that yellow piece, and then after I sew something to the yellow piece, I will sew those two pieces to the red piece. But are you getting the idea that it's very haphazard, and it's kind of loose and free, and it's just fun. And you use a lot of your old scraps. And you can also take a lot of your scraps and just cut them all into uniform sizes, like maybe cut all 1-inch squares or 2-inch squares or 3-inch strips, whatever you want, and you can have a scrappy quilt that's not quite so unstructured like this one is going to be. This one's going to be very unstructured, as you can see. My only rule here is nothing. There's no rules, just make it weird, make it colorful, make it crazy, make it bright. But like I said, you can pick a style and follow it. You can make everything square, you can make everything blue. There is no limit since it's a scrappy quilt, and your only goal really is to make something cute from all your scraps. Now, right now I think I'm getting close to 10 inches. I need this to be at least 10 inches in one of the directions. So I'm getting there. I think I'm close enough on this one. And here I wanted to show you about one of those little gaps you have to avoid. You can see that it looks like I've got a solid seam, but if I would sew it right there, there's going to be a hole right there in the seam. So I've got to back this top strip up a little bit so I make sure I cover that little blue piece there. So I don't want that gap in the seam at all. So we're just fixing that before we go any further. Now we're just getting close to having these pieces big enough. And I'm just going to add a few more smallish pieces to make sure I've got my width of at least 10 inches. Cutting off my extra little seam allowances. Some of your seam allowances are big enough that you can save them to be scraps for another piece. I'm not being too neat with these, it doesn't really matter. Let's see, here's another one that's close to being done. Just making sure it's going to be 10 inches in one direction at least, for now. Not quite going to make it on there. We're going to have to add a little bit more yet. This does reduce your scrap pile a good amount, especially if you're making something bigger. A few placemats isn't going to make a big dent in my scrap bin, but it did make a little dent. Every little bit helps, right? And I got more room to make more scraps in there. So we're just going to keep making these pieces until we get them big enough. And then we can trim them all down into some nice straight squares. I think we've got this one about big enough that we can start thinking about measuring it. Looks like it made it. And like I said, you should be ironing this. It makes it a lot easier to sew the next steps. Okay, now we've got our pieces big enough, and now we're going to trim them down. It looks like I can get a 10 by 10 inch square out of each one of these. So we're going to cut it to 10 by 10 inches. Got it all measured out. Make sure it's 10, at least 10 in each direction. I like to count once in a while just to make sure 10 is 10 and I don't have any surprises. So there, now it's all cut. I cut several more. I'm going to make a whole set of placemats. I'm not sure if I'm making 4 or 6, but I'll see once I finish sewing all my scraps together from the pile I picked, but this is our first 10-inch square. It's ready to be made into something, probably a placemat. Now, here we have several of them done. I've got the first 3 done, and I think, after thinking about this, and I was going to make placemats and put some edges on them, I like all the scrappiness of them, and I don't think I want to put an extra edge on them. So I was first thinking just putting some stripes or something here. I don't like that idea. So I think what I'm going to do is just add more scraps to the sides of them to make them 16 inches wide. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, here they are. I've added some extra inches to each one, so now I can make each one 10 by 16. And I'm just going to trim off the ends that I added on. I added some on each end of some, and some I added on all at one end. But now we're just making them 16 inches long. And this one I'm playing with because I got an extra bit of length there so I can decide what exactly I wanted to cut off. So I'm getting cut off there, and then I've got to cut a little bit more off the other end because I wanted more of this color left. And there we have a cute little 10 by 16 inch placemat with a goofy little extra tab there that we have to cut off. Actually, I should just pull that whole little piece off from underneath, but we'll just snip it off and it'll be good. So there is the first 16 by 10 inch placemat. Doesn't that look cute? Now we're going to have to decide binding pretty soon, but first I thought I would show you how I'm quilting these. I've got my batting and my backing and everything all in place, and I think what I'm going to do is just follow the lines of the fabric pieces, not of all of them, but of more of the bigger ones. Some of the little bitty ones, like this little yellow one, I'm not going to bother following, but I will follow most of the big ones. And I think I will just do maybe a 1/4 inch away from the seam with my walking foot. I like my walking foot for all this kind of quilting. But I'm just going to go along the side of each big piece and go back and forth along some of the seams, and it'll look cute. It kind of fits with the scrappiness of the whole design. And I've got the edges of the walking foot are what I'm following to make sure my seams are consistent. And I'm just going to go back and forth, following the seam lines. This is kind of fun. It's not real exact. It's just kind of back and forth, kind of fun. It's also good practice making straight lines. But see, different feet that you're using, whatever you're using for sewing, different feet will have different markings on it that you could follow. Like I've got this little edge right here is what I'm keeping against the edge of my seams. And it's not quite a 1/4 inch, but since it's consistent, it really doesn't matter. The seams are still all the same. And actually on a scrappy quilt, maybe they didn't even have to be. I considered doing buttonhole stitch along all of them, but I figured that would probably take way too long. So I'm just going along, doing a little bit of the quilting as we go. This goes pretty fast. It only took about 15 or 20 minutes for each placemat. And I did end up cutting 6 of them. So it'll be a cute set. I'm going to try and get it done to use it for 4th of July. But you can see now how the pieces are coming together, and it's just a nice, neat look. It's a nice finished look. I use the walking foot with following seams a lot. It's probably my favorite way of quilting anything. Especially since I like using a lot of colors and different prints and everything. I'm just going to fly through a little bit more of this. And we are about finished. Okay, well, I'm going to finish up with all of the quilting on the rest of these pieces, and after that we will do the binding. I'll make that a separate video, and we'll show you binding from start to finish with all the variations. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.